If you're not getting enough though, and one issue that's a real nightmare for thousands of homeowners is a type of insulation called spray foam. People had it installed to help keep the heat in their homes, and for years the government even handed out grants to have it done.
Yeah, but DIY expert Wayne Perry's been to investigate how it's now being called a scandal, leaving some properties unsellable.
Spray foam roof insulation has been marketed as an effective way to warm up your home. And until March 2022, it was even part funded by the government's Green Homes grant. But as some homeowners are now discovering, whilst it might have brought the room temperature up, it could have brought the value of your house down. 6 months ago, Carol from Southend-on-Sea wanted to release money from her property to do up her garden.
But little did she know, a decision she made a few years ago to insulate her loft would put a spanner in the works of her home improvements and also cause her financial distress.
Like many others, in 2021, Carol applied for a government grant to have her home insulated with spray foam.
I wanted insulation done because the house is freezing. The bedroom was the worst room because I've got 3 outside walls, so that room was freezing cold, and I also get the black mould on it. So I thought anything to keep the house warmer.
It works, it's nice and warm in here. When did you realise there might be an issue?
I wanted to do release equity so that I could spend it basically on the garden. I spoke to about 3 different brokers. One asked me if I had spray foam insulation in the loft. So I said yes. So he said, well, that's a problem. They'll insist that you take it out.
Did they say why?
Apparently it can cause moisture to rot the rafters, so it can do damage to the roof.
Carol has looked for quotes to have it removed, but it would cost her around £6,000.
Have you contacted the company who installed the foam insulation?
I did. They said they stand by the product. There's nothing they can do to help me.
So what do you do now?
I'm in limbo, really, until something's sorted out. I feel like I've been stupid, I suppose, in some ways, because there is research out there, but I didn't look for it because I thought the government would have done due diligence, you know, before they offered it to people. But I'm stuck, really. I don't know what to do.
It's not just releasing equity you can have a problem with when it comes to properties with spray foam insulation, it's selling the property too. Bridget lives in Bristol with her partner Colin. A few years ago, they paid around £4,000 to have spray foam insulation in their loft. And whilst it did make the property warmer when it came to selling, she soon found it cooled interest in a purchase.
The agent rang us and said, I'm sorry, your buyer can't get a mortgage. Basically, they were told that once they were alerted that we had a spray foam insulation, they wouldn't touch it. And unfortunately, that means that if they can't get a mortgage, I can't get a mortgage. So if I want to remortgage or release equity, I'm stuffed.
Did you go back to the company who sprayed the foam in the roof?
I did. I went back to them and they basically said it's a whole load of scaremongering.
So what are you doing now then?
We can't do anything. What do? We keep being told the only way you can sell is to have it removed. Who's going to pay for that? How on earth can a householder like myself end up liable for something when we're trying to do something good to insulate your home and make it better? So instead of making it a better asset, I've now made it into a millstone, really, because it's unsellable, unmortgageable.
Bridget and Carol's situations have left me wondering why they weren't warned about the mortgage issues before having the spray foam done.
Would that affect any mortgage applications or anything like that, having this sprayed?
I'm doing a quick phone around to 3 different spray foam companies posing as a potential customer to see if they're upfront about these issues.
What if we come to sell it? Is there going to be an issue selling it or mortgage-wise?
One company did acknowledge there are some issues with people being able to get mortgages if they've had spray foam insulation.
What's really shocking is some companies say that they've never heard of an issue, even after 5 years of installing the spray foam, even when explicitly asked, is there a problem?
I want to find out more about why spray foam is considered such a risk for lenders. Steve Hodgson is a chartered surveyor who advises on issues surrounding spray foam installations.
Mortgage lenders are not only looking after their own risks, but they've got an obligation to look after the people that are buying the home. The problem with spray foam is that it can cause the buildup of moisture inside the roof against timbers that are vulnerable to decay. So I feel very sorry for people struggling to sell or are struggling to release equity on their homes. But on the flip side, actually, those agencies are actually looking after our interests.
And is there any circumstances where you think spray foam is beneficial?
If you're converting a loft into living accommodation and you're trying to improve the thermal performance of a new room, then actually spray foam insulation can be quite useful. But in situations like this, the risks that you're running with this insulation perhaps outweigh the benefits.
When using spray foam insulation, you need to make sure the loft or room you're using it in is well ventilated to avoid damp and condensation, which is why a loft conversion with windows and ventilation can be one way of using spray foam effectively. We asked Steve to take a look at Carol's insulation. First impressions of this installation?
This particular install is really poor. Even if you look just up here, you can see that huge gap between the insulation and the timber, and that means that the insulation really does not do its job at all. But also what we've found is when we've tested the timbers behind that they're significantly wet. Now that's not totally unexpected at this time of the year, but the foam may then prevent evaporation and drying.
The other point about spray foam is that it keeps the heat in your loft, but if your loft isn't in use, there's no point in heating it. It can be cheaper to simply lay insulation on the floor of your loft, keeping the heat only in your home.
This property lends itself very well to insulation across the ceiling, and that would have given a very good level of insulation without putting any of these timbers at any risk of decay whatsoever.
If you've had this installed, or you're buying a house and you see that this is installed, what should you do?
The first thing to do before you spend lots of money on removal is to try and have somebody have a good look at it. Just make sure you do your homework first. Don't just rush to find the nearest removal company to strip it all out. Don't try and do it yourself. Sometimes it doesn't need to be removed, sometimes it does. Don't panic, understand what's going on, make informed decisions.
If you were Carol now, what would you recommend to do in this loft?
My favoured solution, to be fair, would be to remove this insulation and insulate the ceiling and take it back to its original condition.
My heart goes out to Carol and Bridget and anyone else who's concerned about their insulation. It's just a reminder, if you are doing any home improvements, do your research and weigh up all the options.